if the statistics are correct, 43% of women have had an abortion.
And again, you know, he was just talking about, now my wife can go have an abortion without me ever knowing or signing anything. And yet my wife has to sign a consent form to me.
People are understandably cautious. Plus, it's such a taboo topic that we really don't have a space to talk about.
Where's the line here?
Sort of, you know, getting signs and
that, you know,
and screaming cross lines at each other. Like, where do you go to have the abortion conversation? Who do you have that conversation with?
I found out I was pregnant. And let me tell you, that's quite a shock. But what surprised me was they didn't even give me 30 seconds before they said, now, this happens all the time. This was at the doctor thing, the healthcare center I went to. But they didn't even give me 30 seconds before they said, hey, this is a normal thing. We get about 20 people in a week that deal with this, and we refer them up to a clinic in Toledo.
It's up to that student to decide. You know, I have plenty of students who decide that they want to continue their pregnancy. It's my role then to help show them the resources that are available to help them with that. If the student is determined that they want to terminate, it's my role then to help show them the resources that are available to help them make that choice. If it's one for giving up for adoption, then it's my role to be able to help give them the resources that make and support them in that decision. But it's one of laying out for them and letting them make that decision, not a provider.
And then she could see that I was just like, I need to, I literally couldn't think at that point. And she literally was just like, well, when should we set up the appointment? The lady I was talking to. And, then she was like, so, why don't you take some time, you know, to think about it, and we'll see, you know, about setting up this appointment. And let me tell you, I was frightened out of my mind. I didn't know what was going on, and, you know, I immediately called him and my best friend, really upset, didn't know what to do. And let me tell you, that option sounded awesome.
When we get too far into the religious, the political, the whatever, we overlook the fact that at its core, this is a very significant issue that the women who are making the choice have to face. This is a very human issue.
If you think from a philosophical standpoint, how shall we govern ourselves, that goes back to the beginning of time, you run into, at what point do individual decisions go over the group? At what point does the consensus of group override individual decisions? And typically, when it comes to life and death matters, government gets involved, where individuals who have been in conflict cannot on their own resolve the issue.
It's a very different thing for a woman to make that choice illegally versus a culture and a government supporting that behavior, which in my estimation is a genocide. It's a killing of innocent life. And we have a government that sanctions it, that supports it. We have a culture that supports it. And that doesn't seem to say much about our culture or our government that sanctions the slaughter of innocent life.
What are the criteria by which I would say, let me tell you what life is? Or, lower my voice a couple octaves, let me tell you what life is. And try to bully you into believing you must accept my definition. Because why should you accept my definition? What is the cognitive structure that makes my definitional structure better than yours?
Do you really want to take the risk of potentially killing a kid? You know? When does... If And plus, if we, question the sanctity of life of a child in the womb, what about infants? What about when is a life become a life? And is it really our place to say when it does? Because that seems kind of dangerous, because then we start wondering, well, we can draw the line here, 3 months into birth. 3 months into development. Or we can say that the baby isn't actually really human until it's been outside the womb for 3 minutes.
To me, abortion's just. The individuals who are getting abortions suggest to me that individuals are having unprotected sex. That when we as a society are not effective condom users, because if we were, or we're not effective birth control users, we wouldn't have these unwanted pregnancies.
Yeah, there's a failure rate there. And that's one of the things we talk to adolescents about when they become sexually active, is they have to be mature enough to handle the consequences. But no matter what method of birth control you use, other than abstaining, but they say they're going to abstain, but often don't, there's still a failure rate, and you have to be mature enough to decide, are you going to continue with the pregnancy? None of these answers are simple. Do you continue with the pregnancy, adoption, or abortion?
Planning is good and being intentional is good, but we have less control than we realize when we're 18, 20 years old. Things happen that we don't expect. Things happen that are contrary to what we wanted to have happen. In both directions, and so how you react to that, to monkey wrenches being thrown into what you thought was your well-ordered checklist of life plan, how you react to that is yours.
I cannot believe that anybody that's had an abortion, that it's been good. I just really don't believe it. Even if the person says that, oh yeah, I never think about it once. It was the best decision I ever made. No, I don't think about it since. I don't believe it. They are fooling themselves that it hasn't had some sort of effect. Perhaps it hasn't come out yet, but I just really don't believe it doesn't affect a person negatively in some way. I think people are fooling themselves. I know because I tried. I thought, well, it's nothing. You just can't help it. I'm serious. I just really don't believe it. I suppose maybe psychologists could argue with me or people could argue, but I just can't believe it, that it doesn't have a negative effect. And I think that's what I would tell somebody. Are you willing to live with that the rest of your life? I was 6 weeks when I had my abortion. 6 weeks and a few days, and I was scared to death because it was my first pregnancy. Not because of the abortion, because I knew abortions was the safest, most routine outpatient surgery in the world. So it wasn't that, it was because it was my first pregnancy. Who could I tell? How are people going to react? Luckily, my coworkers were very supportive, obviously. My partner was supportive. My friends were supportive. I didn't tell my family because I didn't want to worry them, but they would have been supportive as well. I think this is probably going to sound really weird to a lot of people, but it was the best decision I could have made for myself at that time in my life.
People would write down the license plate number and look them up. People would call their children. People would go to their homes and pick it outside there. So you get up to have your cup of coffee, and there are a bunch of people with picket signs outside your door because they followed you home and they know your license plate, because you are at the Planned Parenthood. And so they brought the protests into people's homes. They threatened their kids walking home from school. It was terrible.
I think that a lot of women's issues are just ways to continue to marginalize women. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Because if you take away abortion, you're taking away some kind of autonomy that we have. You know, we have control over our bodies to get an abortion, and if you take away abortion, we no longer have control over our bodies.
Then the male can use the woman's body anytime and any way they please without consequence, because they know there's always abortion.
She changed my life. Having that little girl live through, I guess, my decision. Because if I hadn't said, I just can't go with it. I know it's your body and your decision, but if you have this child, then I'll raise it.
We do this loving act of sex and we're saying, I love you and you love me, or I don't love you enough to
I'm
welcome
not
this
sure
gift of a
how accurate
child.
this is, but my friend had to go in and wanted to go in and get a vasectomy. And so he went in to get a vasectomy, and his wife, either through this doctor or state law, I'm not sure, had to sign a consent form saying that he was allowed to get a vasectomy.
I've read many books. I've heard many stories that the man doesn't want it, but the woman does. And because she's a woman and it's in her body, she gets to make the decisions about it. And now, the father now has to witness the death of his child.
What I think is important to remember here is that the pregnant woman owns the experience, that it absolutely belongs to her and whomever else she chooses to share it with.
When you look at people who are anti-choice, they most often are not just anti-abortion. They have a policy, similarly, that is anti-contraceptive, anti-comprehensive sex education, so that in all forms of reproduction, and I should say sexuality, not only is it abstinence-only sex until marriage, it's heterosexual procreative style sex after marriage.
It's important for our educators to know that our students have lives outside of the classroom, and that those lives affect them in the classroom. And they're probably not going to want to talk about it.
I would like people to be more informed how the range of effects that it can have on people and who is more vulnerable. We do know a lot about women who are the characteristics of women who tend to have more problems. They tend to be younger. They tend to be ambivalent about the decision. They tend to be more religious. They may have some pre-existing psychological problems, but not always.
I think it's important for the girl to see the development of the baby, and I have different models of the different weeks, and I also have pictures that I go through with the girl, and I try to do it in a helpful and caring and honest way. You know, no pointing fingers. She's got a million things she's got on her mind, and it's not going to help if I'm just judgmental. She needs help.
Every woman who comes to the abortion clinic knows she's pregnant with a baby. Right? Nobody thinks she's pregnant with an embryo, right? When I first started working there, I was shocked. I was blown away. The women would say, well, you know, I have to have this abortion because I can't have a baby. It's just a fetus. Oh no, to her, it was a baby. And who was I to come along and tell her, oh no, it's just a fetus.
You know, it's a reality for a lot more people than we'd like to think. And truthfully, there are situations where I would say I would obtain an abortion. If I was, you know, a victim of rape and I got pregnant as a result, I would absolutely. Knowing what it takes to carry to term, to deliver, that emotional experience as well as physical, I'm tapping out. Like, I'm sorry, but my pregnancy was hard enough, and it was wanted.
Culturally, we have told women that abortion is horrible and shameful, and, you know, you should mourn the death of your child for the rest of your life, and all these sorts of things, and women sort of say, I feel guilty because I don't feel guilty about having an abortion.
I look around at churches or anywhere where I'm in a group setting with a lot of women especially, and I'll think, somewhere in this group is somebody just like me. It might not have happened at age 41. It might have happened at 18. But they're there and they're hurting.
Where the conflict lies with me is that I am liberal, but I tend to be more conservative in that I am against abortion.
It's a very complex issue. I think when I was younger that I just thought it was very black and white, but I think the more that I've grown as an individual and heard people's stories that
when I vote for the most part, I vote my conscience.
They admitted that there are that many.
But there was no way in this last election, because it was an African American man, that I could do that anyway.
I've yet to meet a person.
Even though his abortion stance, I was totally against that.
It was all like, yay, abortion!
Do not respect teenage mothers in this society.
Even the people who are getting them are like,
this sucks. We want them not to have abortions,
if I could do it over, I would.
But we don't respect them when they choose not to. We treat them like they're bad people.
I literally thought
because
that
they
I was
got
gonna
pregnant.
be,
You know?
an outcast if I decided to keep the baby. But
Get rid of choices because we don't like them. Most
I said
people are
before,
not like,
people just need to
"Yay,
realize
open
if
our
they
surgery,"
asked,
like, yay, gastric bypass.
they'd have a much bigger support system than
3
they
daughters, all of
think
whom
they
are
actually.
adopted. So their birth moms who chose
There are
life
tons of
over
things in
abortion
life
have
that we
special
don't like
reasons.
doing, but they exist,
It's like,
and it's a part of life.
it would have been so much easier.
And if we could
there was a
avoid them,
woman who called.
and if we could live in this magical
She
world.
started to tell me why her daughter is a special case.
Maybe the subject of abortion
She stopped
is
herself
just so
mid-sentence.
intense.
She said,
Whether a woman has been
I
through
bet
it,
they're all special
Sometimes
cases,
to
aren't
her
they?
mother it was
a man has been party to
or
it.
to her kids it was a baby.
Just so intense
and
that
she still
people
could
Yeah.
have.
tighten up and
They are.
close
So
down
talk
and don't
about
talk
the
about
baby.
And for her to realize that
it
even in the
isn't
middle of
so
her
black and white, and it's
tirade,
difficult to say
it
that
was
things are right or wrong when
an important
you haven't walked in
moment
people's shoes
for me.
and you
And
don't know what their story
I
is.
hope for her, because they
It's
are
so easy to
all
focus
special
on
cases.
I feel
the
guilty
political
because
discourse
I
and
don't
kind
feel
of battle it. It's so easy to
People are
forget that
understandably
women are
cautious.
actually going through this.
Plus,
that
it's such a taboo
this
topic that we
isn't
really don't
something
have a
that
space to
happens
talk
far
about
away.
it. Sort of, getting signs and screaming across lines at each other.
And we see it.
And for her to
Like,
realize
where do you
that
go
even
to
in
have the
grocery
abortion
store,
conversation?
We're struggling with this.
It would be great.
Who do you have that conversation with?
Black and white, and it's
so
difficult to
great.
say that
An
things
important
are right or wrong
moment
when
for me.
you haven't walked.